Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, Headliner Nation, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle back with my tight end start and sit matchup breakdown for Week 5 of the NFL season. Hopefully everybody is doing well out there and ready to get into Week 5 and get ourselves a dub this week. And hopefully, if you had a bad week last week, like a lot of people did, you're bouncing back this week. And hopefully the tight end position bounces back as well. Let's take a quick look at the accuracy report from Week 4. Ended up coming in at 65% last week, but kind of the same thing I mentioned with the wide receivers. Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, Tyler Higbee, Travis Kelce. All of these guys ended up being misses last week because we're starting them, right? But they all scored under 8 fantasy points, which is the cutoff for the tight end position. And even a guy like Cameron Brate, who with no Rob Gronkowski, we thought was going to have a good week. He ended up missing last week as well. So there was a lot of guys last week who ended up missing, a lot of studs who would have put us well into that 70% area. But that's how it is. That's fantasy football. There's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. But before we start breaking down this week, I got to remind everybody that we've got a new giveaway here in October. And if you want to get in on this action and have a chance to win, you got to head over to prizepicks.com or download the Prize Picks app on your phone, create a new account using code word headliners, and deposit at least $20. First off, Prize Picks is going to match that up to $100. So right there, playing with some free money. But then you're going to be entered into the contest to win our October giveaway. We've got a Manscaped perfect package. We've got a Christian McCaffrey signed jersey. We've got a Fanatics gift card, and we got a little bit of a surprise signature in there as well. You can see everything that you can win right here on the screen. So make sure you do that, get in on the action, and have a chance to win this awesome giveaway in October. But ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time. We got to roll. We're jumping into tight end start and sit. Los Angeles will match up with the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football to kick off the week. And for the Los Angeles Rams, I'm going to be going with Tyler Higbee as a start this week. The Seattle Seahawks are allowing over 13 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Obviously, we could see a decent amount of Higbee. Now, Sean McVay did come out after the wide receiver start and sit video was recorded and said that they are going to be actively looking to get Robert Woods involved. If that happens, I do think Tyler Higbee could end up taking a little bit of a hit, but as of right now, this is a pretty good matchup for him. I'm going to still roll with Tyler Higbee as a start. And for Gerald Everett and Will Dissly, both of these guys are going to be sits for me this week. Dissly seeing a little bit more in terms of volume outside the 20s. Gerald Everett, when you're inside the 20s, he's more of the kind of the red zone threat there. It just hasn't really materialized into anything. For the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons, Tyler Kroft, Ryan Griffin continue to be sits for me in the New York Jets. For the Atlanta Falcons, I know you're frustrated with Kyle Pitts. I know it, and I hear you all out there. And it was one of the things that we continue to remind people about this offseason. Yes, he is a great talent, but they're not going to be using him as a normal tight end. He's going to have some things to learn and some things to get better at. And we're seeing some of those inconsistencies. But the thing that isn't inconsistent are the targets. He's 7th among targets right now for the tight end position. And for the price that you paid for Kyle Pitts, more than likely you drafted this guy in like the 4th round. You kind of have to play him because the volume is there. And if you sit him and he goes off and has a big game, is there really going to be somebody that you're replacing him with that's better? That's a better option. I'm still playing Kyle Pitts right now. The targets are there. It just needs to start materializing into yards and touchdowns. Green Bay will head to Cincinnati this week, and Big Bobby Tonyan, he's just going to continue to be a sit for me. There's no reason to keep putting him in your lineup. Right now, among tight ends, he's 23rd in targets and 30th in yards. He was propped up last season by a huge touchdown number. He wasn't getting that much volume. We wrote about that in the draft guide this year, and if you bought the draft guide, you probably didn't have any Bobby Tonyan shares. For Cincinnati, yeah, CJ Who's Your Mama came off a huge huge game last week, but some of that had to do with no T. Higgins being in the lineup. So for right now, it does sound like Higgins is going to be expected back. He is supposed to be practicing this week. If for some reason he doesn't play, then we'll take a look at CJ, who's your mama again. But as of right now, we're going to move him back to a sit. Detroit at Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson is letting us down the last 2 weeks. Great 2 weeks to start the season, bad 2 weeks the last couple of weeks. So yeah, the last 2 weeks has been bad, but really, honestly, who hasn't struggled recently? I am worried about this matchup though, because Minnesota hasn't even allowed a touchdown to a tight end yet this season, but we got to play him. Right now, TJ Hawkinson has 2 less targets than Travis Kelce and Darren Waller, both of which who lead the league. So are you really going to sit a tight end who is having that many targets come his way? It's basically the same thing as Kyle Pitts. Unless you own a Travis Kelce or a Darren Waller or maybe even a George Kittle, you kind of got to roll with the guys who are getting a significant amount of target share. For the Minnesota Vikings, Chris Herndon is going to be a sit, but I am going to go with Tyler Conklin this week as of right now as a start. I don't know about Dalvin Cook. I am not sure if he's going to play this week or not. If there is no Dalvin Cook, Tyler Conklin is going to be a start for me, because 2 weeks ago when Cook missed, they kind of supplemented some of the targets over to Conklin that they normally would have utilized with Cook. Conklin that week had 8 targets. He caught 7 of them for 70 receiving yards and a touchdown. Will we see some of the same thing? It's quite possible. If not, though, if Dalvin Cook does end up playing, we're going to move Tyler Conklin back to a sit. So you just got to continue to monitor this one. Denver at Pittsburgh, and for Noah Fant, he is going to be a sit for me this week. A pretty decent game last week, right? But Pittsburgh is very athletic at the linebacker position and on the outside. That makes it really tough for tight ends, because when tight ends are trying to bump off some of these guys or trying to do like a block and then run out for a route, when that happens, it becomes really, really difficult, because those linebackers are so fast and so athletic. They can keep up with Noah Fant if need be. Fant is 6th in targets right now, so a pretty decent target percentage, but his yards per reception, his yards per target, his yards after the catch, all those things, those are dreadful. He's just not breaking a lot of big plays right now, which we've seen him do in the past. So for that, because the upside really hasn't been there, because this is a tough matchup for him, I'm going to go ahead and stay away from Noah Fant this week. And for Pittsburgh, Pat Freiermuth, I know a lot of people love him. Listen, I like him too. It's not going to happen this year, though. We're probably a year or two away from Pat. Miami and Tampa Bay, and for Mike Gesicki, the last 2 weeks, 15 receptions on 18 targets and 143 yards. He has been the tight end 3 the last 2 weeks. Tampa Bay allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and there's no props up on Prize Picks yet for Mike Gesicki, but keep an eye on it. If his name pops up before Sunday, I'm probably going to hammer the over on the yards. It depends on what they end up coming in as. For Tampa Bay, though, O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, I mean, we looked at them last week with no Rob Gronkowski and said, these could end up being decent plays, right? It didn't happen. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was something else, but Brate and Brady, they just didn't look to be on the same page, and they sent a few targets to Leonard Fournette last week too. There were 6 targets to Brate, but if Tampa Bay were to run away with this game early and they start running it a little bit more, then at that point, the passing game, it's really going to be dependent on the wide receivers, and Brate and O.J. Howard just won't have a lot of upside. New Orleans and Washington. And for New Orleans, we had Juwan Johnson as a start last week. We hit that with the touchdown, so that was awesome. But other than that, the tight ends really aren't doing anything in this offense, which makes it driving me nuts, because I don't understand why they're not looking their way more often, but they're not. So this offense has just been super inconsistent. Part of that inconsistencies are these guys. For the Washington football team, Ricky Seals-Jones, he's going to be the starter in place of Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas, unfortunately, going down with an injury last week. Continue to monitor his status and everything like that. But Ricky Seals-Jones, we've seen him pop up in the past, but I'm not willing to take that bet right now. Philadelphia at Carolina, and I mean, we have a hard enough time finding starting tight ends as it is in our leagues, right? I mean, it's just, the position can be a wasteland at times. But how often are we starting 2 tight ends from the same team Philadelphia is making it possible right now with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, who I both have as starts this week. Zach Ertz coming into this week, or over the last 2 weeks, excuse me, Zach Ertz has been the tight end 6. Over the last 2 weeks, Dallas Goedert, the tight end 7. Now, Zach Ertz is running a route on 95% of their passing plays right now. So, Zach Ertz is really that guy. Dallas Goedert is he's like at 73%, and that's because Dallas Goedert is being used more as a blocking tight end. Now, Carolina defense against tight ends is kind of middle of the road. We're looking at about 11 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, but both of these guys are still going to be starts for me. I don't trust the wide receivers this week. Carolina has been very stingy on wide receiver points, so expect Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert to get a decent amount of volume. Ertz is going to be the volume guy. Dallas Goedert is going to be the red zone and touchdown guy. Tennessee at Jacksonville, and I'm going to expect Anthony Firkser to get more involved this week. The Jacksonville defense allows over 15 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, one of the worst marks in the league. And because of the injuries at the wide receiver position, not really knowing yet about A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, I've got to put Firkser as a start, because when you're playing a defense that just has this tough of a time against tight ends, you got to utilize him, and hopefully they do that this week. And for Jacksonville, Dan Arnold is going to be a sit for me. I'm not quite ready to give him that opportunity. Now, I think here soon, yes, he's going to be a guy. I kind of like the way that he was looking last week, kind of getting him on up. But again, he's only a week and a half into his Jacksonville tenure at this point, so I like him, but it's not quite time to start him yet. New England at Houston is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week for the tight end position. Don't forget, our friends over at Manscaped are giving you a juicy discount. If you use code word headliners at checkout, 20% off your entire purchase, and you're going to get free shipping. For New England, they're going up against Houston, who allows the second most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, we mentioned it with Philadelphia. How often are we starting tight ends from the same team? We are going to do that with the New England Patriots this week. Jonnu Smith is a little worrisome for me, but I am still going to put him as a start based on this matchup. Now, he kind of let us down to begin the season, right? He's been given some opportunities. He hasn't made the most of them. He's had some bad drops. Hasn't looked great. Hunter Henry, though, has been a little bit more consistent, and we saw it last week in terms of the volume overall to Hunter Henry compared to Jonnu Smith. I think that continues. I think Jonnu Smith is going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent, and Hunter Henry might see a little bit more of the volume and some of those counting stats that kind of help kind of boost past those 6 points that you'd get for a touchdown. For Houston, though, Pharaoh Brown, Jordan Akins, nothing to see here. Let's go ahead and move away from them. Chicago at Las Vegas, and the Las Vegas defense is quick and they penetrate fast. That's what she said. Now, for the tight end position here, Cole Kmet. Okay, I'm going to go back to him as a start this week. I keep hoping it's going to happen, and it hasn't happened, and I'm going to keep hope up this week, because again, Las Vegas is so quick and puts so much pressure on the quarterback that hopefully Lazar, calling the plays now, is going to recognize that and is going to utilize Justin Fields, his legs, rolling him out, getting him on the run, having him throw on the run a little bit. If he does that, that's Allen Robinson and Cole Kmet to me. If you remember, during Monday Night Football, the Las Vegas defense, they got beat at the tight end position. Both Darnold Parham and Jared Cook for Los Angeles scored touchdowns. Jared Cook actually received a little bit of volume last week. They had such a tough matchup on the outside with the wide receivers. They looked to the tight end position a little bit more. I'm hoping Chicago realizes that and goes with it this week and gets Cole Kmet some more looks. I think it would be good for him and for Justin Fields against this defense. And for the Las Vegas Raiders, it's Darren Waller. If you own him, you start him. For Cleveland and Los Angeles, Austin Hooper is going to be a start for me this week. The LA Chargers allow 14 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Now, They were able to slow down Darren Waller a little bit last week, right? Maybe it wasn't them necessarily. Maybe it was just, but he did end up scoring. So Austin Hooper, I'm going with some potential touchdown upside this week with how well the Chargers play against wide receivers. Again, the Chargers allow the second fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Hopefully the tougher matchup will push them leaning towards the tight ends a little bit more this week. Cleveland is a lot tougher against tight ends. Cleveland allows under 9 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So I know Jared Cook is coming off a good week last week, but I'm still just not ready to dedicate to him too much yet. His production last week really came from the lack of production in Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. If Mike Williams and Keenan Allen had been fine and getting open and all of that, probably Jared Cook doesn't see what he sees last week. Now, it is going to be a tough matchup for them, but also keep in mind a guy by the name of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, one of my favorite draft prospects this week or this past season. I mean, he's going to be a guy that kind of plays that hybrid role where he can cover the tight ends, and he's very, very good in coverage, and he's definitely going to beat up on Jared Cook if that's who he ends up facing. The New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys, and Evan Ingram, he did get 6 targets last week, and as discussed during the wide receiver video, they just might not have a whole lot of time to throw. So because of that, I'm going to go with Evan Ingram. Now, 6 targets, not a whole lot of production, but he did catch 5 of them. He's not being used to stretch the field, though. And again, a lot of this goes back to, is Sterling Shepard going to be healthy this week? Is Darius Slayton? As of right now, I don't have updates on whether those guys are going to play. So Evan Ingram will be a start for me this week based on that volume alone. And for Dallas, I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz. New York allows the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So I think Dalton Schultz definitely could be a safe start this week. San Francisco at Arizona. George Kittle, he's 4th among tight ends in targets right now, but he hasn't scored yet, and that's part of the reason that his points are a little bit lackluster. Expect him and Samuel to be safe if Lance starts. Still no word on it as of this recording if Trey Lance will be the starter, but if he starts Kittle, Debo, expect Lance to really be keying in on those two. And for Arizona, Max Williams, I get it. Some of you keep asking about him. Hey, this seems like a guy. He has 2 good performances this year, but he has 2 duds as well. And his snaps played actually has dropped every single week. So he's playing less snaps now than he was in week 1. He was playing like 80% of snaps week 1. He was down to about 55% of snaps played last week. So they continue to drop. That's kind of a concerning trend for me. So I'm not going to go with him in this matchup. Buffalo at KC and Dawson Knox. Kansas City allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight end. Dawson Knox, we're going to lock him as in a start and over on Prize Picks. If he pops up as a touchdown scorer, I would take that prop if I were you for 1 touchdown this week. Definitely could be another great look for him in the red zone. And for Kansas City, Buffalo does allow the 4th fewest points per game to opposing tight ends, but you can't sit Travis Kelce. I expect them to try and take Travis Kelce away, but after last week's performance, I also expect a Travis Kelce bounce back. Indianapolis at Baltimore. Mo Cox, Mo Problems is going to be a start for me this week because the Baltimore defense has allowed a touchdown to tight ends in 3 of the 4 games that they have played this season. So I'm going to go with Mo Cox, Mo Problems as a good red zone target this week for Carson Wentz. But they got to be able to move the ball that far. So you're either going to get like 8.5 points from Mo Alley Cox, or you're going to get 0. So if you're wanting to start him, it's a little bit of a risk. For Mark Andrews, he's starting to hit his stride again. He's looking good. He's looking like that guy again, that main target on that offense. Marquise Brown looks good. The offense as a whole, even though they've had kind of an issue at the running back position, the passing game, I mean, to me, it's looking a little bit more consistent than what we've seen in years past. All right, Headliner Nation, there you have it. All of the matchups for week 5. All the matchups for week 5 at the tight end position. Make sure you hit that like button for me and subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners. And make sure you leave a comment down below. Is there somebody that I have listed as a start that you're not that excited about? Maybe somebody listed as a sit that you think could have a great week. Let me know down in the comments. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.